Daren in Bologna, Italy, when he was the only U.S. winner of the Bologna Digital New Media Prize. So, long story short, our publication was asked to coordinate this prize, and it was the first international prize for children's digital media, which at the time was CD-ROMs. And so, at that point, there were over 500 entries from 30 countries. And we actually got the discs, and the jurors got together, and we would debate, and the jurors were from Asia, the United States, and Europe, and we had these wonderful weekends and so on, and there was, after all of this judging, only one U.S. title won. We were always blind to country and whatever. And one of the things that we agreed as the jurors was that we try to get, not the vice presidents, but we try to get the designers to come and accept the prize. And so I called Sunburst, who published this this program called Math Arena. And I said, you know, you guys, congratulations, you won, and you know, would you like to come to Bologna and pick up the prize? And but we'd like to. We don't want you. We want whoever made, and I didn't know who made it. And so yeah, you know, there's this nice young man who's responsible for it, and we'll send him. And so they did. And so I met Daren in Bologna, walking around, watching kids. I saw this American, and he was, there were some kids there demonstrating stuff, and I looked at him and said, this guy's really into watching these kids. It's like, what's his deal? And I said, you're from the United States. So anyway, we went out and had a pizza after that and talked about our research and all kinds of stuff, and that's how I met Daren. And then so, when I started, was coming up for speakers for the first Tester Magic, Daren had to be one of those speakers because his message in terms of purity of design and the ability to win an international design competition, I didn't know that it was one guy working on a Mac behind his couch that had done the whole thing. So it's my pleasure to introduce my friend Daren Carstens for the first talk this morning. Daren?
Thanks. Grab the mic. So good morning, everybody. What I want to do today is actually focus on the learning part about what we do. I think I see a raise of hands of how many people have an app in the education section or working on an app, right? It's pretty much most of us. So I really like to look at the educational part. So I'm going to talk about setting the stage for learning. And of course, we're always talking about magic, and we all have different ideas of the magic that we're looking for and what that is. And who does the magic, right? A lot of us have been talking about how do we make magic. And when you think about magic, these guys pop up right away, right? It's kind of like, which one of these guys are you? And I would say this, though. This is what I loved about Harry Potter. Who did the magic in Harry Potter? It was the children, right? This is who I think we should be, right? We're supporting the magic that children do. And that's the way I want to approach what we're doing. And so I wanted to go in and kind of talk about, for me, and it could be a lot of different things, I really want to focus on the learning. And how do we do that? So the first part, I just want to talk about what do we do for this? Before we even start talking about the kids, how do we prepare? So preparation, I think, is the first one. Because I think our greatest tool, greatest resource is our experience. And I like to think of our experience in a couple ways. One is, what have we done? The other one is, what will our experience be in the future? So I think we need to be constantly building our experience for the future. This is what I think we all should be doing here. Number one, we need to honor our responsibility to all children. So when we participate in this children's app space, we have to accept and champion a great responsibility of children. All our job descriptions, I believe, are now more than simply I'm a game designer, or I'm a programmer, or producer, or entrepreneur. I think all of our job descriptions in this room need to include being children's advocate, children's educator, and even children's caregiver. We're making decisions. We heard a lot about making decisions, and we're talking about a lot of complicated things. How do you market? Do you sell to kids? Are we collecting data on kids? Is there violence in my app? What are the sales tactics? What are the messages that we're doing? And I believe this, that if most of the decisions we have are put through the filter of what is best for the children, they tend to answer themselves. The second part I want to talk about is, I think we need to learn about all children. In order to responsibly create things for children, we have to continue to learn about all children and the different ways that they learn. It's just an observation. But like the rest of us humans, this applies, I believe. And that is, one size doesn't fit all. I think a lot of times we try to get that one app that's going to cover everybody. And we really need to think about how are we inclusive and sensitive to the differences, right? There are different abilities, special needs, different learning styles, gender, cultures, interests, backgrounds. It's real easy for us to kind of think of our own children, or only the kids that we are encountering. So we really need to think about all children and trying to include them. The other thing is, we're always talking about wanting kids to be lifelong learners. We need to be lifelong learners. So learning about children, there are many things we can do, right? We can research, we've got the internet. All these topics that we learned today, some we just kind of touched briefly, get online, go deeper into what all those things are. Visit schools. Hang out around children is a good one. Do things like coming to Duster Magic. So I mean, kind of preaching the choir, we're doing those things, but really be conscious about how you're doing that. And then the other one is be more childlike, right? Children are human-like, we can be childlike. And what I mean by this is also have that empathy for children. Know what it's like, not know, but try to understand what it's like. This is a picture I've shared with you guys, my two oldest sons, first day of school, right? What is it like to be the first day of school? Right? What's going through their heads? And do you remember what that was like? My youngest was, of course, in the little stroller behind where I was taking the picture. So these guys, these two, my youngest is Stan, this is Matthew, that's Tim. Some of you have met him because I brought him to Duster Magic. And I want to encourage people to bring their children to Duster Magic, but I also want to send out a couple warnings. So 2 quick stories. So Tim is starting high school this year. He's in the band, and he's thinking about doing marching band, and he was worried about maybe not doing it. And so he said he would do it. He went to the first rehearsal, got him ready for the second rehearsal. He goes, yeah, I'm not going to do it. I'm like, well, why not? He said, I don't think I'm developmentally ready for this activity. I kind of thought, since you just used that phrase, I think you might be. And then Matthew I brought last year, at this last Duster Magic, and my favorite story of that was, we had all the video games set up here. So he was kind of in the front, playing all these violent video games that he's not allowed to play at home, but at Uncle Warren's event he can. And I started going on a little rant about how people will use a subject matter that doesn't, I think I finally said, what do zombies have to do with math? And he just kind of turns and he says, you can cut them in half with a chainsaw. So number 3 is educate intentionally. Children learn from everything they interact with. So we're responsible for the lessons we create, both intentionally, and I think even more important, unintentionally. we need to be on alert for those unintentional lessons, right? It's real easy to put out misconceptions, or stereotypes can sneak in without you even realizing it, or insensitivities. For instance, that zombie idea, I started thinking, well, that'd be really cool. You could do stuff like, shake the zombie, and all these little parts would fall off, and then you say, what percentage? And then I'm like, you can't do that, right? Because what if there are kids who have parents that are missing a limb or something like that? So sometimes you start thinking things might be funny or a good approach, but you really, I think, need to think of the sensitivity of who's going to be seeing this. And then, of course, I'm all about celebrate learning, right? We have so many times where I think a lot of people try to make learning fun, and they approach it from the wrong angle. I think what we should be doing is saying this is the most amazing stuff and we want to share it. And so one thing I want people here in our industry to do is think about what we talk about when we say things. And I think here are some misguided quotes that I kind of hear a lot. First one is, wouldn't it be great if kids can have so much fun playing a game they don't even realize they're learning? And I think the answer to that is no, right? We want them to know that they're learning. We want them engaged. We want them to know the power of that. So I was getting these reviews with my game originally, and they were saying basically that. Best thing is they don't even know they're learning math. So I changed my start button to do math now on almost all of my activities. I want kids to know they're doing math. Another one is, our job is to make learning seem like fun. We've seen this, right? Broccoli and chocolate. And the idea is that I've got something that kids don't really want to do, but if we dress it up with fun games and characters and everything, it'll make it more fun. And I think this is Henry Jenkins. I think the problem with the broccoli and chocolate, with what I've been seeing, is that the idea was, you have this nutritious broccoli and then you have the chocolate, but the stuff I've been seeing, we don't really have nutritious broccoli. I think we have more of a fish stick, right? And it's not even a fish stick, I think it's an old fish stick. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of us are creating apps where we're taking old models, things that you had to do because you were limited to a printed page, and then we're putting chocolate on top of them. I also put a fresh fish stick there, see? So there's a fresh one.
Pretty good on the next slide. It's like if you went into a first grade right now and saw what kids were learning, the content, you compare it with some of the content that we've been seeing in the apps, and we saw what Max is doing with content. That's fresh. That's a fresh California salad in terms of stuff to learn. And the stuff that's still being part of our formal education system is a great metaphor. It's like an old fish dip. I just want to really hammer that one. Right, Gail?
Right. True.
It's time for some good stuff.
Oh, so basically what I want to look at is kind of focus. I think a lot of us are doing the chocolate part pretty good. We're spending a lot of our time and energy on designing that part of it. How much time are we really spending on that fish stick? And I think we should be doing at least equal amount, or if not even more. Another one is, using gamification, we can get kids addicted to learning, as if addiction is a good thing in any form, right? I think gamification we need to be careful of, because a lot of those techniques are set up for different reasons, right? You're trying to get people to keep playing your game, or you're trying to get them to do things that maybe they normally wouldn't do. We already have a place that does that, and I think it's called a casino. And I'm not sure that's the model we should be applying to our children. The other one is this. When someone comes up and tells you the solution is, and I got the secret sauce, right? I'm going to tell you, this is the answer to everything. There is no secret sauce. right? I mean, for me, the idea of a secret sauce is like you could just throw any kind of ingredient in, as long as you sprinkle it with that secret sauce, you're gonna have a gourmet meal. And that's not true. And it can't be true because everything is so different. The kids are different, their learning styles are different, their situations are different, the types of things you're trying to learn, they're all different. So first, that's a warning sign. Someone says they have the solution, yeah, kind of remember this. The sauce is a lie. And then the main one, big one, is, I think important, is have a mission. We've heard a couple of people talk about that. You need to have a mission bigger than whatever that app is. Mission can't be, I want to make apps, right? Usually when I tell people what I do, I don't usually say I make apps. I tell them I create educational stuff for kids. I think it's a bigger mission. And I want kids to get excited about learning. I really like math, and I think one of my missions is, I came to math as an adult is when I discovered it. I did okay with math in school, but it wasn't until I was designing a textbook series that I actually discovered the amazing thing called fifth grade math. And part of me was excited because I learned this new thing. The other part was kind of going, how come I didn't know this in fifth grade? And part of my mission is try to sneak that message into kids through my apps. Okay, so now I'm going to move into a different mode, and this is a big part of what we can do, and that's share. And I give Warren applause for creating a thing like Duster Magic because he provides that environment where we're all sharing. And I think it's important to share. As Barbara said, you learn when you're trying to share stuff to other people, but I think it just helps us create a better group of people making better stuff. And so what I'd like to do is share some of my approach to things. So these aren't the answer. It's not the solution. It's not the best way. I'm just going to talk about it's the way I feel comfortable doing things. When I think about learning, there are different ways of thinking about it. You have memorization, you have rote, and we've talked about different types of learning. One of the things I'm kind of interested in is taking something that's kind of confusing and making it so it's easier for kids to understand. I'm not teaching the kids. I'm trying to just provide an environment that supports their understanding. So how do we help children understand? I think we get kids thinking, and more important, we get kids doing. So actually doing the thing that we want them to do. I want them doing math. I want them doing what scientists do. I don't want them just answering math questions. I want them actually doing those things. So step one, finding the experience. And I know a lot of us think of it as games right away, but I want to say learning experiences don't have to all be games. So when I say experiences, I mean that environment that you create where kids are going to understand a game is just really one tool that it's not even new. Teachers have been using that for a long time, but it's not the only thing you use. So one thing to do is look within the content. I like to think of kind of a sculptor who looks at driftwood, and they're going to look into it and say, what's actually in the content of the subject matter you're teaching? So if you're going to teach symmetry, don't all of a sudden jump to pirates that don't have anything to do with symmetry. Actually start getting into symmetry and find out what's so amazing and cool about symmetry, and then try to present it to the kids. I sometimes approach things, and what I like to do is I like to break the concept down into its kind of basic systems, traits, and rules and patterns. You get those basic rules down, so in case like symmetry, you figure out how all those things work, and then you create an environment, kind of like Dan was talking about. But you create that environment using those same rules. And then you look for the game that's kind of within that environment you have going. See the content in the kids' world, right? So before we start applying stuff from our world, try to think if you could find things that are already in the kids' experience that you could use. I found this one on, someone posted this one. On Facebook. But that's like perfect, right? Know the classics. there's a lot of really good stuff that has come before us. So know what those things are, and a lot of times you'll find that those things will kind of come into what you're doing. Watch amazing teachers. If you could go to a teacher's conference and sit on workshops that they do. Teachers, I think, they're my heroes. They're the most amazing people in the world. I think that they get a bad rap a lot of times, right? A lot of time it's all broken, the teacher, blah, blah, blah. You go to a conference, a teacher's conference, where they're giving workshops, there are amazing teachers doing amazing things. And they have learning models that they're already using. And it's amazing how many times I'll see a learning model and immediately I go, I can see where that can be an app. So look in those places. Also, look at what the amazing students are doing. You can't just remember what it was like when you were a kid. Kids are doing completely different things. I highly recommend having children, if you don't have children. If that's not an option, get to where children are, right? Go to school visits or get involved in some other things. So that's kind of finding the experience. The next one is, how do you expand the understanding? For me, I like to start with a simple task. And the simple task just keeps you away from that blank screen where I'm not sure what I need to do. And I found that if you have a simple task, you can then branch off from it. And you can make it deeper and bring richer things into it. But I think it's nice to have that simple task so that the kid can see, okay, I know what my main goal is, and I'm going to start doing it. And what I love is then, if you can make it so that the things that they do to do that simple task reveals a lot of relationships, I think that's when things are starting to feel good. Scaffolding, we talked about scaffolding, so that importance of being able to have kids come in at different levels. You know, they could come in at a beginning level and they could start to layer how things get more difficult or more deeper. Multiple entry points. I think it's important to give kids control of their learning. I want kids access to everything. So I know a lot of times we're making games, and one of those gamification models or techniques is to lock levels. You know, you have to do level 16 before you get to level 17. Well, what if a kid's ready for level 17? Why are you locking them out of it? And sometimes you're locking it out of it because you're trying to create a great game. But sometimes when you're doing that, you're actually creating stumbling blocks that get in the way of the learning. So I really like the idea of keeping things open. Make learning personal. Usually the stuff I do involves problem-solving skills, and I try to make it so that there really isn't just one correct answer. Kids can come at it from different directions. I want them to have ownership of the understanding that they're doing. Power of success. You need to have a lot of real successes, not just little flashy badges. You need many of them, and you want them early. And you want them to be the kinds of things that are intrinsic to learning. Fail, right? We always talk about the importance of putting fail in your design so that kids can learn from their mistakes. Well, I kind of do that, but I don't think of it as fail. I call it gathering data. So they didn't get anything wrong. They're in your environment. They're trying to figure it out. It's what scientists do. It's what mathematicians do. Part of it is figuring out what doesn't work. That's not failing. That's part of the process. And some quick design ones. Make it intuitive. Hopefully they can kind of figure it out without instructions. Make it beautiful. Kids deserve beautiful things. And so I think that's a very important thing. Keep this interface simple. So many times we see things, and I do the same thing. You want to put all this stuff in there. Next thing you know, you have this like helicopter. You need a helicopter's license just to figure the thing out. Really get it down so that when they see that screen, they kind of know what the target is, what you're trying to get at. You don't want people saying this. Sometimes I see them, I go, oh, I get it. The interface is the puzzle. because you can't even figure out how to get into the game. Nice touches. We talked about nice touches. Remember all those nice little details that make things more enjoyable. And we're going to talk about some of those later, I think, so I'm going to skip on. And then one of the ones I really love is leaving fingerprints. I think it's really important in learning to have a personal connection of some sort. And so I always try to leave fingerprints, evidence that there's a crazy guy who thinks math is amazing, and he put this thing together. And I'm going to show some stuff, so I'll show you how I do that. But I really think it's important to leave evidence that there's someone who really, really, really thinks this is cool stuff. And if this crazy guy thinks it's so crazy, it's so good, maybe there's something there to look at. And so what I want to do is I want to jump into, just show some of my apps, just so I can share kind of how I approach it. So I've been doing my own apps, but I also do other apps for other people. And so the first one I want to actually take a look at is one I did with PBS. It was for Sid the Science Kid. And one of the things I loved about Sid the Science Kid was it was a show that I was watching with my youngest. And so I really felt like I had an understanding of what their mission was and what they wanted to do. I got the sound out. I'm just trying to skip through here. I'm going to go to one of the activities that I think is just a good example of the simple task and then making it bigger. So in this activity, what PBS was looking for was just a magnifying. They wanted to use a magnifying glass. And I thought that was great, but I wanted to expand it, and I wanted to show you how I was able to bring more content in on top of that. So originally it was going to be magnifying glass kind of in the backyard, just trying to find a bug in the grass somewhere. And what I did was I have it set up so that instead we're looking at details in collections. So really get into the idea of why are you using a magnifying glass? Well, it magnifies, but you're also looking for details. I also love the idea of we were able to then bring in the idea of collections and what makes a collection. And we have all these different collections that you could choose from. And we actually thought about what those collections were. A lot of them were scientific things. My favorite one was, actually at the end here, it was a collection of friends. But the basic idea was you need to find wherever that detail is. So that's one example. I think I'm running out of time, so I'm going to jump into math doodles. I just want to kind of go in and just kind of talk about why I made some of the decisions that I made. So first of all, that personal touch or that leaving fingerprints.
I thought math looked like this.
I actually start out with how I came about finding math myself personally.
During my math classes, I drew a lot of those. As an adult, I discovered math also looks like this. I still draw doodles.
And it takes you to the main menu. In the main menu, I want to point out something is, I really like the idea of how teachers will have posters in their classroom, just showing all those crazy math things. So if you look in the background, I actually have things that actually change every time you come back to the main menu. So up in the corner here, I just have kind of cool math concepts. Down in the bottom, I have who does math. So software developers, nuclear engineers, game designers, scientists. On the side, I have little quotes for math. I have over here just different representations of values. I'm going to get into just an activity real quick. And so this is sum stacker. Now, I wanted to get on addition and subtraction, but I didn't want to just be calculation. I wanted to have problem solving, and I wanted to have it so kids would be learning more than just adding and subtracting. So the way this activity works, you simply create the different sums on the bottom, and then you recreate those dice. Now, remember when I was talking about classics? Who knows the puzzle of Hanoi, where you have to stack? This doesn't really follow that principle, but I do believe that part of the stacking came from me knowing that puzzle. The other thing is, I love how much more math is in here than just adding and subtracting. So for instance, does it matter when I'm doing 7 here? Let's see if I do, what do I want here? Let's just go 2 and 5. Kids get, or, all right, let's go. Let's say you were doing 7, you have 2 and 5 here. Does order matter? Does it matter whether it's the 5 on top of the 2 or the 2 on top of the 5? And kids are trying to start realizing that it doesn't matter, right? Those are math concepts. Does it matter going across though? So a teacher could go into talking about how these are combinations going this way because it doesn't matter in combinations of the order, but permutations do matter. So it does matter whether I have 9, 5, or 7 in the correct order. They could get into a whole lot more different activities. I also love the idea of then taking the concept and scaffolding it. So in this case, my scaffolding is I'm starting with concrete models for the kids to add. They can count those dots, right? You could change it to fingers. Still concrete. I can count fingers. I have these little counters. I bring in 10 frames. These are things teachers are using in the classroom. Still counters. I have tallies, Spanish tallies, and then I start getting into the symbolic. So now we're doing digits. We've just crossed over to a new method for kids. And it's scaffolding. They're now using symbols that they probably know. And as they start to know these symbols, they start to memorize them, and that's okay. They start to realize that squiggle 8 and that squiggle 3 always gives you those 2 11s. So the next thing is you switch the symbol on them. And what this does is it makes you start to think about the values again because you don't know those symbols so greatly. I can go in and, let's say, do Chinese here. And I leave the key on the side. But the activity works the same way, but now we're using Chinese. And so now I'm also including other cultures, right? So I'm still having that same simple task. I've scaffolded. There's other relationships of numbers that kids are realizing, and now we're able to bring in other cultures. I have Arabic and Gamuki and Hebrew, Hindi. I have binary, just for you guys. This one drove my son crazy. It's Braille. Dad, it doesn't work. You can't feel it. But it was a moment when I was able to sit down and say, yeah, I know it doesn't work, but I want people to know that there's a system of Braille. There are people who need Braille. It's just bringing more and more, making the activity richer and providing for other things. Words, right? Now we have words that you can do. Still works the same way. Spanish. I have polygons, and then I have money. So I have this one activity, this one engine, the main concept, the main task, but now kids can explore money. And it's the same thing. They're going to start seeing relationships of dimes and nickels and pennies, and if it's looking for something that ends in a 5, I might need a nickel or a quarter, but maybe not the pennies. I also then get into fractions, and I have 3 miles of fractions. I think I have time for, I'm not sure how I'm doing on time.
You have about 32 seconds.
All right, I'm going to show one more thing. 2 more things real quick, and then I'll finish up. One is, this is just another of the fingerprints. I've been including an activity at the end that was just a sketch. So in this case, I actually put a note to the kids that say, I'm currently designing, programming, and illustrating this new math doodle. I want them to know there's someone who's actually making these things. And it's a working sketch, so they can actually do the activity. But it, once again, just reinforces that idea that there's someone out there. This one, I just want to show real quick because some people might have seen it, used to be my sketch called Splat Degree. And so I just updated it, and so now it's new. And the idea is you need to splat the flies real quick. So if I go 7 hours, it splats the fly. Once again, I went into it and I said, oops, sorry. Let me go back there. I went into it and I said, well, how do we then reapply that same concept? So here we could do hours, we could do minutes, we could do angles, fractions, percents. I even have radians in here. But the idea is that they have this simple task, They're starting to realize the rotation, which is what I want them to do. But now they could also start making connections between angles of a circle and the percentage of a circle. And then just real quickly, in my hard mode, I go into this mode where if you land on a tunnel here, it actually takes you to a new clock. So now they're taking that system of a big clock and they're realizing that same system on the big clock also works in a smaller clock and in multiple clocks. So it's just that idea of taking a simple task and then expanding on it and making it deeper and richer and having them make other connections. And then one more thing, I know I keep saying one more thing, is this. That easy hard thing is something I try to put in because it does one thing. It allows for kids to come in at different entry points. But as I'm creating an activity, I find that the thing I end up with sometimes is too easy, sometimes it's too hard. And so what I usually do is I kind of go where my gut gets me to, and then I know that when I get there, I'm going to adjust. And so I'll kind of go with my intuition, and then I usually end up with something that's really complicated, and I start stripping things away. And so at some point, this did have that helicopter pilot license part of it, and you start pulling things away, and it also adds to the problem solving. So when you get up in angles, you can't always just punch in the correct answer because I limited the buttons. So they now have to add angles and do things like that. And so basically, I guess I'm out of time, so that's basically my talk.
Daren, I was just taking some notes here. Just as a designer, he talks a lot about nice touches. Put yourself inside the app. At the beginning of the math doodles, you hear Daren's voice. And there's another, Identicat. I'll try to show that to you in the nice touches. Identicat has a little movie of the children's author in her studio making the sketches. You know, Dan, it'd be awesome if you could put a little movie somewhere of, you know, just who you are and how you came. So it's about, all librarians would love that because you want to know the voice behind, and there's no reason not to do that. This is interactive, so you can do that. Another thing is the thing you said about unlocking levels and letting the child explore, and you know, Piaget. What he's saying is every time you teach a child something, you prevent them the opportunity from discovering it themselves. When children discover something, the learning is so much, all the scaffolding and the connection is so much stronger. And so what Daren's talking a lot of is about efficiency in learning time. We want to use those childhood minutes, which is finite, to the most use. Donna Stanger, who was at Edmark, used to put this feature in her apps that would apply to Angry Birds, and almost a lot of the apps that I've seen, that anytime you see a lock on a level, what she would do is she'd put a challenge mode and an explore mode, and she would let the child be the pedagogical designer. There's no reason why you can't let the child take control of their own theory or their own educational philosophy. If you feel like a constructivist and you want to try level 13, let them take their finger and put it on explore mode, and all the locks disappear. And if it's too hard for them, then they can control what level they have. But maybe they want the challenge of the Angry Birds approach, and they want to work through it in that sort of manner, or they're feeling more mastery learning mode. Well, then they can do that as well. And so you can build those options in. So I think those are two really good points. Would you agree, Barbara?
Issue for us. You know, with ours, we've done the Angry Birds model where you have a level and then you can do it on stars. And for us, I agree completely with what you're talking about. I think my preference would be that we have 16 levels. You can go pop around the levels. There's a risk that in level 8, you've missed the game mechanic that was not your concept mastery, but the game mechanic that was introduced in level 2. And if that's the case, you can go back. But the larger issue is first when we dump you into that level select screen, it can be very overwhelming to not know where you're supposed to go. Right. So locking everything out but one is a really nice way to say, go here. So what I'm thinking in here, you talk, is maybe you want to explore some things like you have 16 levels. All of them are locked. The first time you go, one is open, everything else is locked. Then once you do level 1, you come and you kind of have figured out how to navigate the level select screen. So then everything is.
She used to use a thing called the challenge slider. And it was actually a slider where at the time was a mouse and you click and drag. But you could just, from easy to hard. And with pop, 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 and you could even put a sound with it, you know, with string getting tighter. That's the super hard. And, you know, so, and let them, and so, yeah.
The other thing is, I also hear from a lot of designers, and I'll hear this a lot. They'll go, the kids aren't doing it the way we designed them to do it, right? They'll say they're not jumping through the hoops we set up to have them jump through. And I always try to tell them, well, that's okay. You know, it's okay if it means they might have found a way that is actually makes it more personal to them. I think that's a great thing. And I think that like the big levels or low levels, they'll go there, and if it's too hard, they understand the concept of I'll go down 2 levels or go down 3 levels. But it's not just the levels, it's other things that, and I do the same thing sometimes, is you start going, I have this great feature, how do I make sure the kids do that great feature? And I think it was last year, Max's friend, Teo, one of the things he said that I loved was, he said, take that thing that you designed that you think is the most cherished, best idea you've ever created and put it in the trash. And at first I thought, I want to go dumpster diving around his place because he's probably got some really cool things in there. But you don't have to put it in the trash, but I do recommend taking it out and seeing how things are looking. And you'll find out that you're basically, because you fell in love with that concept, sometimes you don't think as straightly with it. But.
Thanks, Daren, for another great talk.